how much can we convert from the current fleet of diesel mass transportation vehicles in America into electric vehicles?
Well, eventually we can do the entire fleet, but it won't happen overnight. What we know is that we're in a race against time. And so I believe that this would probably eventually happen no matter what, but it might happen 10 or 20 years too late for us to get the climate benefits, create the jobs, have the transit electric vehicles of the future be made in America, and be able to capture those savings that communities want.
Let's talk about the grid, the electricity that's needed for these vehicles. Right now, we're still in a situation where the majority of electricity that would be used to charge these buses comes from fossil fuels. So as we put more and more pressure on that grid, we both have deteriorating grids and the need to generate more electricity as opposed to generate more fossil fuels. How do you think about both of those things?
Well, we definitely need to do more about our grid. We've seen things that I never thought I'd see in America, like during the ice and snowstorms that hit Texas. Blackouts lasting to the point that American families were melting snowballs in their bathtubs to be able to flush their toilets. That shouldn't happen in the United States of America. So any way you cut it, we need to improve our grid. We've got to make sure that we're investing in electricity. It may not seem sexy, but imagine what would happen if we move toward having more frequent problems or outages. It's simply unacceptable, especially given how much we rely on a good, strong electric grid to make it possible to do everything from doing your homework to charging a car to going about your life.
You said when you were mayor of South Bend that you could repave every lane mile of street about every 100 years or something like that. In normal times, streets need repaving probably every 15 years. In times like this, where this part of the country was well over 100 degrees for several days 2 weeks ago, we literally are seeing roads buckling, melting, and crumbling. But again, how do we think about long-term maintenance costs? It seems to be something we have a political problem with accounting for.
Well, this is part of what we mean when we talk about resilient infrastructure. With the more frequent weather extremes we're seeing, you can pretty much guarantee that we're going to have more freeze-thaw cycles on roads in places like the Midwest. Unfortunately, more deadly heat waves where we saw things like those roads buckling on I-5 here in Oregon. So we've got to build in a way that's smarter and that recognizes reality. Of course, we also have to do our part to prevent climate change from getting any worse, which is why I keep emphasizing that this transportation policy is also climate policy, whether we call it that or not.
So none of this should actually be partisan, right? And historically it hasn't been. These days it seems everything's partisan. Yeah. We seem to be able to get bipartisanship on the physical parts of the infrastructure that you're talking about, the transport, the electricity. We're having more difficulty on the other parts of it, the things that the president calls human infrastructure. Republicans saying that's just dressing up an infrastructure bill with Democratic priorities. How do you look at evolving this conversation into a world where we think of some of those human infrastructure things as part of infrastructure?
Well, I think the bottom line is these things are good policy. We could debate all day over what to call them, but the idea that Americans ought to have paid parental leave, just like people in pretty much every other country, I think is something that you don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to believe in. And by the way, across the country, most people think we ought to do it. It's in Washington that there seems to be a problem. Now, early on in this debate, if you remember a few months ago, when we were talking about human infrastructure, I heard a lot of care is great. Building veterans hospitals is great. We just don't think it's infrastructure, so you should put it in a different package. Fine. Now it's in a different package. Let's see if they'll vote for it now.
Some of the worst things that have happened in our country about keeping people separate have happened because of transportation and infrastructure, where highways have gone through communities, highways have split communities, highways have been driven through places that black people lived in this country. That's hard to change. How do we think about infrastructure in a serious way that centers equity in the middle of the conversation?
It's critically important, and it is challenging. If you have segregation caused by, let's say, a discriminatory hiring policy, at least in theory, on paper, that policy could be changed overnight.
Right.
You can't change the location of a highway overnight. And so if it went, especially if it went by design, on a pathway that divided a white community from a black community, community or removed a racially minoritized neighborhood, which happened time and time again, north and south in this country. It's going to take a lot to address that. Again, this is an example of where many of the solutions will come from the local level. Our job is, first of all, to provide the resources, and secondly, to provide an expectation that the future decisions we make about where resources go promote and do not diminish equity. The history of transportation and justice are much more closely connected than people think. I know it's not the first area of policy you think of, maybe when you're thinking about civil rights, for example, but from Plessy versus Ferguson, which is about who got to sit where on a train, to the Montgomery bus boycott, the truth is they've never been separated.
Is that a role? Is there a role that the federal government has in sort of saying, here's how we look at this and here's how we fix it over time?
I think there is, and it's something that we've tried to make clear from the moment I came in this department. For example, if a community is trying to apply for a competitive grant for federal dollars that my department oversees, one of the things we expect to see is that the voices of underserved and overburdened people who had been impacted by that or would be impacted by it, that those voices are heard, that they're part of the decision-making process. At the end of the day, the voices of those who have been most excluded have to be in the lead in shaping solutions. And when they are, often the entire community is better off.